Welcome back. Dr. Dickerson, we've talked about the overall program approach for feeding the cow and that calf until weaning time. What about that weaned calf, given all the stress that's involved during that weaning stage?
That's a very important stage. If we're going to build better cattle, we've got to address this weaning stress stage. That calf by mama, he's naive. That's all he's known is mama's tender loving care. And we go through the weaning process and we take him away from his closest relative. we commingle him with a bunch of others. Yeah. We then put him in a pen that he's never seen before, or we put him on a truck and then put him on a pen. We change his diet. We change how he gets water. We process them, and most of the time they're exposed to dust or very wet, cold weather or snow. Mm-hmm. So it's extremely stressful time period in their lives, and our intent is to try to minimize that stress as much as we possibly can. But when you stack all those things on top of those, it really, really imposes a real strong effect on their ability to be able to stand against a health challenge.
I know you all are such a research-based company. What kind of research have you done at Land O'Lakes Purina to determine what we should be and could be doing for that stressed calf?
We've been working on weaning stress feeds and the keys of taking a calf through that stressful time period for over 40 years. One of the initial products was preconditioning receiving chow. Mm-hmm. Our intent and what we found is that there is a direct correlation of how well we can create an environment to keep that animal healthy, mm-hmm. and how soon we can get intake. With a product like preconditioned receiving chow, we can get within 5 to 7 days 2.5 to 3% of body weight intake. When we do that, we are actively feeding the rumen microflora that digest the feed, and we're able to feed those microflora within the rumen and provide their needs for ammonia, energy, minerals of all kinds. They in turn process that feed and give it back to the calf so he can use those key nutrients to withstand a challenge on his health system.
What about for those producers who either A, don't have a facility to wean calves in, a trap, nothing, or for some of my bull customers who end up with a bunch of hay and they want to use their own forage and hay to background those calves? What would you tell folks like that?
Sure. We've been able to look at different ways of doing things. If it's a complete feed basis where you can wean them in confinement and we're trying to optimize gain and cause our feed to be the most efficient, then we use a preconditioned receiving chow or our new generation starter that uses our intake modifying technology called MPEG starter. If a man really wants to focus on using his hay, his grass, we have a product called Range Cattle Starter. It's a 5-pound package with AS700 where with a forage, hay, grass, etc., if it's running 8% protein or higher in combination with the 5-pound package, we're able to still have that calf get the key nutrients it needs, and they won't gain as much as if on a complete feed, but they still are able to get the groceries they need to get us through that difficult time period and still meet the producer's demands to be able to use this forage base.
Yeah, that's a great point. So do this. If you were to just summarize what we've talked about so far relative to the sustained nutrition program and its value in the cow-calf operation up through weaning, what would you tell us? How would you synopsize that?
We're trying to build better cattle. From the time that animal is conceived within mama, mm-hmm. all the way through the phases, even past the weaning phase. And to do that is to provide a sustained nutrition program that meets the need of the animal to help him express his full genetic potential. That's what we're trying to do.
Well, I know you all are a feed nutritional company, but Dr. Mahoney, I can't help but ask you about vaccination programs, and what would you recommend from that standpoint?
That certainly is an important part of getting those calves ready to perform well as we go through the marketing system, ending up in stocker, backgrounder, feedlot operations. And as we talked about earlier, I think it is important to make sure that the producer is consulting with his local veterinary practitioner, key herd advisors, on developing the appropriate vaccination programs. It's also important to review some of the requirements for some of the preconditioning programs, and in many cases your local veterinarian will be well versed in those to make sure you stay on course. Fundamentally, there's several different strategies that are used to try to enhance or optimize immune stimulation in these calves. prior to exposure to these disease-causing pathogens. One strategy is to begin their immunization program 2 to 4 weeks prior to weaning with a booster at weaning. The other strategy is to give their primary immunization at weaning and boostering 2 to 4 weeks post-weaning. However, as you heard Dr. Dickerson discuss the stressors that are involved in the weaning process, more and more people are trying to figure out how to get these immunization programs done prior to the animals being weaned so that they are vaccinated at a time of low stress. We want to make sure that those animals are on a solid nutritional program so they can respond by producing antibodies to the antigens that we inject through the vaccine. And we want to make sure that they're given at a time when environmental conditions are appropriate. So again, that doesn't become a stressor on the animal, to give that animal a great chance of responding to the vaccine. Kind of like to use the phrase, a lot of us are real concerned about, giving these shots, how many head we can get through the chute in an hour. But we need to focus as an industry not just on how fast we inject animals, but on if we're truly allowing those animals to be exposed properly to the vaccine to actually develop a good immune response. That's the key factor.
Well, so what would you tell us as a cow-calf producer, if there are one or two things that I need to remember to make certain I'm getting that optimum immune response, what would it be?
Well, I think as you look at these programs, certainly we want to make sure that we use good quality vaccines. And those vaccines that are used typically have a viral component. Things like IBR, BVD, PI3, BRSV are kind of the fundamental building blocks of a solid vaccination program. But a lot of other products need to be considered too. Those could be the 7-way Clostridial vaccines, some of the modern Mannheimia hemolytica vaccines with leukotoxoid. Some of those combine Pasteurella multocida, and then even Histophilus could be a consideration as we look at appropriate vaccine selection. So again, it's important to look at the programs that they're interested in participating in. If those calves are going to go to a backgrounder or a feedlot that's a known entity where they're going, a lot of times it's good to communicate with the veterinarian that oversees health programs at that feed yard, backgrounding operation, to make sure that the programs that you use are consistent with what they're looking for.
So you have a great animal health protocol and you fed them correctly, but what about parasites? I can tell you that's one of the areas that I've become a real believer in as well, that can absolutely suck profits from an operation. What's your sense about that?
Yeah, I think that's a very important part, because there's a lot of focus on selection and administration of vaccines. Sure. But we do know that both internal and external parasites can be extremely costly in terms of animal performance, animal health, and potentially an adverse effect on immune response. So certainly administering parasiticides that are effective, and we have a lot of excellent products out there. Some of the Poron injectable products, oral products are available that can do an excellent job in trying to maintain a low parasite load in the animals that we're taking care of. But I think it is also important, again, to bounce some of those choices off your attending veterinarian. These parasites do develop resistance over time, so we want to make sure that we are selecting appropriate and effective products and administering them correctly.